Hey everyone, welcome. Good to see you today. Christian will be here. There we go. Hey Christian, how you doing this morning?
I'm very well, thanks, Reed. How are you? Great to see you.
Yeah, you as well. Thank you for coming back on again. I know last year we had you on for the kind of the external tool and everything that you helped build out, and given the announcements and everything that have happened recently, and some of our conversations at the MVP Summit. I'm really happy to have you back on again to talk about Fabric this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Great timing, Reed.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's. I mean, I think as Satya's kind of said, like this is one of the biggest things to come out in the last 18, 20 years for Microsoft, as far as some of the forward progression and evolution of the industry and just I'd say online platforms in general. So
Yeah.
really exciting stuff that's coming out this week to build.
Absolutely. So Satya set the bar pretty high when he said that Fabric is the biggest release since SQL Server. I mean, we believe it is. It is the next generation of of a data platform for analytics projects, and we're super excited. This is what we've been working on for so long. It's fantastic to see the attention that it's getting out there. It's fantastic to see the attention it's getting from Satya, from Scott Guthrie, and the whole industry. I mean, we were on the homepage of CNBC. There was an article about Fabric. I was like, yes, we made it. We're on the homepage of CNBC. So yeah, we could not be more excited.
So there's a new word that's actually in the chat that I haven't heard yet, but I like this. Jorge was mentioning, he's saying like high fabricators. So I like that as a description of people who use Fabric as a fabricator. That's the first time I've seen that, and I hope that catches on. I actually do kind of like that as a title for people using the platform. But it's something that I don't think it's hyperbole to a degree of like what Satya said. It's a giant leap forward for sure. But I do know that there's a lot of fun stuff that we'll be talking about today. But I'd love a chance for you to introduce yourself a little bit for the people who are tuning in who maybe aren't familiar with you or what your role is within Microsoft or around Fabric.
Yeah, absolutely, Reed. Thanks. So I'm Group Product Manager for what we call professional business intelligence in Power BI. And now that Power BI is an integral part of Fabric, I'm the GPM for Pro BI in Fabric by definition. And so, the way we categorize, we've even split the organization. We've got counterparts. My counterpart on the self-service BI program management or product management team is Mo. I think you've interviewed him, right? And so, so Mo is concerned with that persona of the self-service analyst that is going to gather the data themselves and create reports without a dependency on IT. And my primary persona is to make the BI developer successful, right? Which is, so the BI developer typically rolls up into IT and works on these kind of large scale mission critical systems that get deployed across development, test and production environments, require source control integration. And the goal of the kind of the semantic model that the BI professional creates is to promote a single version of the truth in these large organizations, promote consistent decisions, promote reusability of the semantic model across large organizations. And so, yeah, I mean, this is a great time to be a BI professional in the age of Fabric, right? I mean,
Yes.
the role of the BI Pro is going to expand exponentially with Fabric. I mean, and the good thing about it is that there's so many kind of familiar experiences that show up in Fabric, right? You know, like for data prep, you can use Dataflow Gen 2 and all of these analytical engines, you know, whether you're using Dataflow Gen 2 and ADF and or Spark, they all generate the same Delta Parquet files, and there's a lot of familiar experiences. So yeah, I'm really excited for the BI professionals who are the primary persona that I'm responsible to make successful. And so I feel that this is a great time for BI pros right now.
And one note on that as well is I think talking to quite a few individuals, both at Microsoft and externally, the amount of new stuff coming out to either add to an organization or to reconfigure for an organization, I think there's going to be a renaissance of work available for independent consultants as well, for clients that are going to want to do adds, updates, or changes to their architecture or their things just within their organization as far as BI is concerned. I will imagine in the next 1 to 3 years with a lot of these new features and everything coming out.
Absolutely, Reed. Like, you know, it's a win-win situation, right? For all of us. You know, this is the next generation of this technology. There will be massive opportunity for large organizations. You know, data is driving organizations nowadays. These large organizations, the big customers, I'm not going to say them by name right now, but you know, the biggest organizations on the planet who are our customers, they depend on data for competitive advantage. I mean, they can't be competitive without it. And this trend is only continuing, right? They're going to milk the data for everything they can. And it's very complex for them. And there is a massive opportunity for them to simplify and just have a much more efficient, much more manageable overall analytics solution. And so, yeah, absolutely. There's opportunities for partners. There's opportunities for business users to delve into new capabilities that were just beyond their reach before. And there's absolutely opportunity for the business intelligence professional to expand their role, to go beyond what they were doing before and add value to large organizations in a new way. So yeah, it's a very exciting time. Like I can totally get why Satya would say this is the biggest release since SQL Server. Absolutely, 100%.
And one other thing that I want to preface to the people in the stream as well is we want to make this very conversational with you, Christian, of course, and questions as relevant, because there already are a few of them. I'll bring some of them up, cue them either for the general QA at the very end of the live stream or more of the open-ended stuff. If there's things that are on topic for anything that we're discussing through here, we'll bring those up as kind of relevant as we go through a lot of the stuff that's in Fabric. And I will say that there will probably be a mix of both kind of high level and technical ones. And we have Zoe, who is in the chat, who will also help throw some links as able into there. But I know, Christian, with you as the program product manager kind of for this stuff, there'll be some stuff that you'll, I'm sure, be able to answer, and other stuff that will probably just defer to, like that's more of a technical question that we'll have articles and blogs on at another point. But
yeah,
between the two of us, we'll answer as many as we can.
Absolutely,
those as appropriate. So
absolutely. And real quick, I'm happy to keep things conversational. In fact, I want to, because you know, just real quick before we get started, Reed, like we've kept this thing locked up. Obviously, we have a bunch of private preview customers, and you know, we have an extent, like all of our biggest customers that are the biggest organizations on the planet, you know, in the Fortune 500, etc. Everyone knew this was coming, but we've kind of had to keep it under wraps, like keep it locked within a box. And finally, we can be open about it and talk to people like you. So This is, something I've looked forward to for a couple of years now, is just having a conversation with
Yep.
you and the community openly. And finally, this day has arrived. So thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely, and it's always a privilege to have you on. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
If you want, we can kind of get started and start the
sure.
conversation on kind of like what the platform is.
Yeah, absolutely, Reed. So, the reality is today is that as I was saying, the largest organizations, they depend on data to run their business. They depend on data for competitive advantage. It is absolutely critical for the success of of these organizations today. But the reality is it's very challenging to stand up an analytics project. And, it's very costly. It's very time consuming. And, there are all of these different areas that need to come together, right? Data engineering, data warehousing, business intelligence, data prep, all of these things, like the vast majority of analytics projects use all of them. So the customers are responsible for integrating all of these different products into one whole. And this is why there's like 4 or 5 different magic quadrants, one for each of these Gartner
Yeah.
magic quadrants, which, by the way, we're leaders in each of them, and we have been for a long time. So we have a lot of depth and history and heritage in each of those different areas. But we were competing on each of those magic quadrants within the scope of that magic quadrant, when in reality, customers are, using the products and services represented by each of those magic quadrants as one complete system. And then the customer is the organization that is responsible for stitching it all together, right? Because
Exactly.
customers today are locked into proprietary vendor formats, and there's a lot of integration work, right? And there's a lot of data fragmentation, and we know that data fragmentation, and customers know that data fragmentation is poisonous to organizations seeking to embrace a data culture. It adds integration costs. It adds multiple versions of the same data. It adds data duplication equals management overhead, basically, right? And so apart from being locked into all these different proprietary vendor products, which is very costly to transition away from, they're locked in, and there's all of this extra integration cost, there's all this data fragmentation. And so this is the reality that analytics projects are today. And this is what Fabric is addressing with the open standard format that we are adopting as Delta Lake and Parquet. So, for example, Power BI and the data warehouse and all of the data prep tools and Spark, everything is adopting Delta Parquet as its native storage format, which then gives us an opportunity not only to unlock our customers, to set our customers free, so to speak, but also to have all of the analytical engines work on a single copy of data, right? This is, just a revelation to the customers that we've been talking to on private preview, that you can have all of the analytical engines working on the same copy of data. This really, changes everything. It's going to change how organizations deliver these analytical projects. It will change the role of the business intelligence professional. And it really is the dawn of a new era in terms of analytics projects and analytics platforms. So this is really the key is you've got an open standard format with Delta Lake and Parquet. You've got one copy of data shared across each of the analytical engines. You've got deep integration with Microsoft Office, so you can meet the business users where they are, so to speak, right? And that is inherited primarily from Power BI, because we are everywhere, right? We're in PowerPoint, we're in Teams, we're in Excel. We are deeply integrated into Microsoft Office. We may as well be one of the Microsoft Office applications. I mean, we may well be soon. And so we're deeply integrated into Microsoft Office. So all of that put together, right, is already a massive value proposition. Now you're going to sprinkle on some Copilot on the top, as the icing on the cake. And it's just coincided with the advent of Copilot and AI and these large language models. And it's just this is the thing about it, Reed, right? Is that it's not like just I'm going to go off on a tangent for just 1 second to talk about Copilot, because it's not like there's a Copilot team or a Power BI Copilot team. Every single product manager in Microsoft who is looking at their backlog of features is going to have a checkpoint to say, is this a good candidate for Copilot? It's going to show up in Pro BI for code generation and DAX generation, and just interaction with the Pro BI capabilities. It's going to show up in Outlook. It's going to show up in for the self-service persona. For things like the summary visual, the Copilot summary visual that Zoe demoed in our session. It's just showing up everywhere. I mean, it's literally becoming ubiquitous. And the most exciting, or one of the really exciting things, is that this has just coincided with this advent of Fabric, which is really, it's just going to add so much fuel to the engine of Fabric. I mean, literally, I couldn't be more excited about how it's all coming together.
I think as we were discussing the other day, is like some of the biggest costs of any BI or analytics projects for organization is involved usually with data movement to a degree. It's having to get the data around into new locations and reconfigured to use in different locations. Like, I mean, it's the reason that we don't just do direct query all the time against a database is it's not going to perform well. You have to then, you have to get it into a Veritapack format and all that. And I think that that's the thing that ties everything together within Fabric, is just the fact that your data can be pretty much in the, the OneDrive data, as one like could be described as, and the amount of data movement now to get it to be used in the data factory, or to use with real-time analytics, or to put it into a Spark job or a notebook or a Power BI or anything else, just parks in one spot, and it can be accessed as many times as it needs, and compute cost calculated from there. But I think like that really is, to me, the biggest game changer of this, is just the centralized location to keep your data, and then a lot less data movement required across all of this, which I think will just reduce the complexity and the cost and number of artifacts to a degree that a person has within their tenant. So I think that's going to be really, really powerful. And as we'll get into in terms of like the direct link connections and all of that, but like that was the biggest thing for me, is just, we can kind of just kill direct query scenarios, and a large data set formats in Power BI are the two biggest pain points that I see customers having, and that's largely eliminating the need for ever using either of those if you're using this platform holistically for your company, and not using like other locations for data, or at least minimizing the use of those.
Absolutely, Reed. 100%. In fact, that's a good segue for us to talk about direct lake, which is really the kind of secret sauce, right? Especially from the Power BI standpoint, right? Because really, as you said, it eliminates data movement and data silos and data latency, and the cost of managing and replicating this data, which is really the biggest pain point and the most costly part of an analytics project from the customer perspective. And not just the cost of paying for the additional compute that's required to perform, a refresh on a 100 gig model, but the cost of ownership, right? Customers have got SLAs with their business users. The IT organization has an SLA with their business user. They have to make sure the thing has run successfully by a certain time. It's a big deal, and the cost of ownership is just really key as well. So yeah, if I may, I'm just going to summarize what you just alluded to there, Reed, which is the way that Power BI is a native part of Fabric, because it's actually using that same Delta Lake and Parquet storage, right? So the history, where we were up until Monday, before we announced Fabric, it was that customers had two options. direct query and import mode, which we're all very familiar with. These have been around, we defined this and, 20 years ago, when we first launched multidimensional with MOLAP and ROLAP, it was basically the same deal. And the concept is that with direct query mode, users interact with visuals on Power BI reports. Those Power BI reports generate DAX queries to the Power BI dataset, represented here by Power BI Analysis Services. And the Analysis Services engine then went through something that is quite expensive from the kind of the overhead standpoint, is that we would translate those DAX queries into one or more SQL queries and federate those SQL queries down to the data source, which would typically be, say, a data warehouse. Now, apart from the overhead of performing the translation, the real problem here, because there are benefits here, right? You didn't need to manage a refresh, and you're going to get, close to real-time data. You're going to see the data that's in the data warehouse rather than having to wait to perform a refresh. So there's pretty low data latency. But the problem really is that, having to submit these SQL queries to these other database systems, let's be honest, they're not as efficient for BI-style queries. They're efficient for other scenarios, which is fine, but they're just not as efficient for BI-style queries. Us and every other vendor have optimized, have done a lot of work in optimizing direct query. And it's not just about query reduction, it's about the overhead of those queries on those other systems, and your query processing is happening on the other system. You're at the mercy of that other system, right? And so the query performance is nowhere near, on average, nowhere near what you would get with import mode. So with import mode, so the vast majority of customers end up using import mode primarily for the performance. And with the import mode, we cache the data and we put the data in our little copy. So we actually have files that we put the data into. And if you install SQL Server Analysis Services on premises, for example, you can go to the data folder and you actually see the files. But they're a proprietary format for Analysis Services and Power BI import mode, right? It's the same proprietary format. And so we store the data there on the files on our file system, whether it be Azure Blob Storage or Azure Premium Files. We'll put the data there. We don't expose it for Power BI or any, we don't expose those files, but the data is there stored, and those files are stored in a column-oriented form, and that's really important, right? Because the reason we have the fastest BI engine on the planet is because we defined the column-oriented storage form for BI queries all the way back when we first launched VertiPack in, around 2010 for Power Pivot. And we have a lot of history in this space, right? And so we cache the data in these files. And then when the query comes in, we read just the data that is necessary to answer that particular query, and we get blazing fast performance, without a doubt. Like, it's significantly faster on average than direct query. But the problem with import mode, of course, is that you need to cache the data, you need to refresh the data, you need to manage refreshes. And when you're talking about many tens of terabytes of data or more, and which compresses to 100 or 200 gigabytes, for example, we see typically for large models in Power BI Premium, that's a management overhead, and you need to optimize that refresh. You need to do partitioning. You need to make sure incremental refresh is running correctly. It's a significant amount of work, and the cost, like the vast majority of cost for Power BI Premium. So Power BI Premium Gen 2 is a CPU-based model, right? So the primary currency, just like with Fabric, it's a CPU-based model. And the vast majority of cost from the customer's perspective is to perform a refresh, right? Well, guess what? With direct lake mode, you don't have that problem, because with direct lake you don't need to do a refresh, right? We query the data directly from the lake, and guess what? You get the same performance as import. And this sounds too good to be true. How can it be the same performance as import? People see this initially and they say, isn't that just like direct query where you're just querying the source? Well, we're querying the source, but we are not at the mercy of a query processor from some other database, right? We are actually using the exact same query processor that we have for import mode. We're running Vertiscan queries, but instead of getting the data from our little column-oriented set of files, we're getting the data directly from the lake. How is this possible? Because Parquet happens to also be a column-oriented form. So we adjusted our engine. It's kind of like Parquet was created with, it's like the stars have aligned for us, right? Because Parquet is also a column-oriented form, and we modified the analysis services engine to work with Parquet directly instead of these proprietary column-oriented files. And then we get the same performance. It's literally the same query plan. It's the same query engine. It's the same query capabilities as import, but you don't need to perform a refresh, right? And this really changes everything, because your data is already in the lake. You would land it in the lake. You do data prep, whatever you would normally need to do. You then don't need to extract and load it into a data warehouse. Because you can use the lakehouse that is getting the data directly from the Parquet files. And you can now get the whole Power BI ecosystem just sitting right there on top of these Delta Parquet files in the lake as well. And this is really the secret sauce that makes Fabric a unified analytics platform, right? This is the real game changer, in my opinion, is the one copy of data. And it really hinges on the fact that we have, coming on close to 15 years of history in this space of column-oriented of business intelligence queries that benefit from column-oriented storage, which happens to be exactly what Delta Parquet is. So it's like the stars have aligned for us. We're using the completely open standard Delta Parquet, and you have the whole Power BI ecosystem sitting on top of it without having to perform a refresh, right?
Now, there are a couple things on that. So you did mention the term Vertiscan, and Donald actually had a great question, just wanting to know, like, is the term Vertiscan in any way like an official label or name of the direct lake version of Tabular that's kind of coming out as part of this platform?
So Vertiscan has been around. It's more of an internal name, to be perfectly honest. It's not something that is in the marketing materials, but it has been around since the inception of the Vertiscan. Oh, sorry, the Vertipack engine, right? So we launched Vertipack around 2010 for Power Pivot. Then it showed up in 2012 with SQL Server Analysis Services 2012. And we've kept optimizing it. And so our engine runs a Vertiscan query that reads the data from the column-oriented storage, which now is Parquet, and it yields this blazing fast performance. So it's more of an internal name, but as I say, it's been around for many years, and we're using the same analysis services engine that we have been using for over 10 years, but it's working natively with Delta Parquet files in the lake. And so the key here is that the storage is now Delta Parquet in the lake, but the analysis services query processing engine is the same as what we use for import, right?
Exactly. And I think on top of that too, just to go off of that idea of the Parquet and the Delta Parquet format. So Parquet is essentially the open source file type that's stored in the columnar format and has some amount of compression and everything that goes into that. Now, can you describe the difference a little bit on just like a regular Parquet file versus like the Delta Parquet type that will be kind of the default storage type for the data inside of the OneLake locations?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Parquet files that we use in Delta Lake, they are 100% just the standard Parquet files that they comply with the Delta Lake standard. So they are just standard Parquet. You can even bring in, Justina showed in some demos where you can create shortcuts across Fabric Lakehouses. You can even create a shortcut to Databricks and S3 and other anything that has a Delta Lake Parquet, you can create a shortcut to that. And guess what? Even Direct Lake Mode will work with those too. Now, it's fully compatible, right? Any tool or process that speaks Parquet can work with these files, right? Now, I will just say that there is some, even without Fabric, even without Microsoft in the picture, different vendors have different levels of compression for their Parquet files. And that is the compression is not part of the Parquet standard, and it's not part of the Delta Lake standard, and we do achieve really good compression. And to be the data that we're seeing is that when you set a shortcut to Databricks or an S3 or any other vendor, I'm not referring to any vendor in particular, the performance is not quite as fast as for the Parquet files that you would create using any of the tools under the any of the tools that under the kind of banner of Fabric, right? So so whether it be data flows Gen 2, whether it be ADF, whether it be Spark, Python from Python notebooks, whether it be Parquet files that are created from the data warehouse using T-SQL, those ones will all get the best level of performance for Direct Lake Mode. But Direct Lake Mode is compatible with any Parquet that conforms with the Parquet standard and the Delta Lake standard, and all of the Parquet files that Fabric creates are 100% compatible. It's an open standard, and we are 100% compatible with the standard. One 100%. Absolutely agree. Yeah, absolutely. So you would get much faster performance than direct query on average for any Parquet Delta Lake file. That's absolutely true. And honestly, the secrets, yeah, I mean, yes, there are differing levels of compression between each of the vendors for these Parquet files. If you take Microsoft out of the equation, that's a fact. But honestly, the secret sauce isn't even just really the compression. It's the way that the analysis services engine is able to read the Parquet files, right? This is where we have significant amount of history and heritage and intellectual property that we've built up for well over a decade that transfers directly into this architecture. It's not just about the compression, it's the way we read those Parquet files. That is the real key. So yeah. Sure. Okay. All right. So should we move on? I'll run a quick demo here of Direct Lake while you're doing that, Reed. Okay. So we start off here in in this case, we're in a lake house. You can see the Lake House Explorer. These are some Parquet files that may have been created using Spark or any of the other tools that
Absolutely.
that can work depending on your skill set and what you're comfortable with. And so we've got these Parquet files. They're partitioned here using the Delta Lake standard. And so all I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this new Power BI dataset button. This will create a Power BI dataset, right? Which for now is going to use the web modeling experience. We'll add desktop support later, right? And so this is the actual Power BI dataset, not the default dataset that you get with a warehouse or a lakehouse. And I'm in the web modeling experience that we recently launched, right? So I didn't need to leave the browser at all, right? And I create my relationships, I create my measures, and then the kicker is that I can simply click on new report and go ahead and create a report, right? And this is almost 4 billion rows of data. This was many tens of terabytes in raw uncompressed form. This was a massive amount of data that would have taken hours to load using standard data ingestion techniques for kind of traditional ETL tools. And so I immediately clicked on the new report button. I have a very integrated experience from the lakehouse to the dataset modeling through to the report. I didn't need to leave the browser at all. And but the key is that I'm getting import performance, right? And people will test it, and there's we're still optimizing it by GA and everything, but we're already being able to make that claim. And the reason we're able to get import performance again is because it's the same engine, it's the same query plans, the same Vertiscan queries. And the key here is that I went straight from creating the data set to creating a report, and I didn't need to do a refresh over almost over 3.5 billion rows of data, which would have probably been a couple of 100 gigabyte large model in Power BI that would have taken probably a few days to do incremental refresh on, right? I mean, this is the key. In just a couple of seconds, I was able to go from the data set straight to the report and create these beautiful Power BI reports and leverage the whole Power BI ecosystem that's sitting right here on top of one lake. And I didn't need to spend a week refreshing the data, and I get the same performance, right? And I don't, and I don't get the performance degradation of direct query either. So, this is the real key from the Power BI perspective. This is why Fabric represents the next generation of analysis services.
Well, and I think there's three big things that this is gonna, I'm hoping, largely eliminate. Because I mean, the three big features that have existed earlier on in Power BI, is direct query, which was just needed either for real-time data, which to a degree still can exist, but also just when data is too large to import. You have aggregation tables and you have large data set formats, all were solutions to symptoms for certain problems that businesses had that were largely due to data migration. But you eliminate the data migration with stuff like this, and the need for all three of those hopefully should be going forward drastically reduced, because you can now integrate it so easily like this. So and those are always painful to have to help customers set up, deploy, and maintain, and it just adds so much complexity to the projects. So I'm really just so excited about the integration of this stuff, and like just how easy it is to bring in and connect to these large chunks of data that are already being kept in those, but getting near import like performance results.
Yeah, and it will, it basically already is import like, and by GA it will be 100% on a par. We can make that statement because we know it's the same engine, it's the same query plan, right? Yeah, so if you think about it, right, this is the future, right? 5-10 years from now, I would anticipate the vast majority of usage will be using this model. But today, it's not like direct query and import are going to go away overnight. And so what we're also planning on doing, this is something that we're working on that we haven't, publicly disclosed, but I have a habit of leaking things occasionally. So we have publicly disclosed that Power BI is adopting Parquet and Delta Lake as its native storage format, right? And so we're going to move away from those proprietary column-oriented storage files, and we're going to move to Parquet. So what does this mean? This means that at some point in the foreseeable future, you'll have maybe an import model that you'd already built for on Power BI Premium Gen 2, for example, that then has a seamless migration to Fabric. There's no migration to Fabric. It will just become part of Fabric if you're on the right SKU, right? Now, but the storage of that is going to switch to Parquet. It's going to switch to Delta Lake. So at some point, we will, rather than just keeping that proprietary those proprietary column-oriented files hidden away somewhere that you can't see, we're gonna once it's actually stored in Parquet form, we will expose that in OneLake, right? So think about the opportunities and the options that are going to become available once we do that, right? Well, you would be able to just, have a lakehouse with a shortcut to that, and you'd be able to run SQL queries on it. You would be able to have all of the Fabric analytical engines work with that data, and you didn't have to do any work. You just took your existing import large model that you had in Power BI Premium Gen 2, and we exposed the Parquet for you, and then now you can run SQL queries on it. You can integrate with other applications. You can integrate with other tools and processes, right? And over time, you will move from import to direct lake. But that alone is a big step in the right direction to this kind of direct lake vision, right?
There's a, and I think similar to, as we're talking about connectivity to direct lake, Daniel Odekaier had a great question that I'll bring up, is how soon will the XMLA access be available for direct lake data sets?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for asking that question, Daniel. He emailed me that question actually this morning ahead of this session, and I just haven't had time to respond yet, so I'll just respond now, which is that it's in execution, it's near completion. I'm not going to get myself in trouble by committing to by disclosing the planned date, but it's going to land soon. Significant. I would anticipate. You're not going to have to wait for GA for XMLA updates. And think about the programmability and opportunity that will provide, right? So, at the moment you've got the web modeling experience, which is, perfectly adequate for our public preview requirement. But, as customers start evaluating Fabric and they start actually putting together these migration plans, which, and these are projects from IT organizations in these large customer organizations, and many of them we know that many of our big customers have these large import models with, many of them have migrated from Azure AS to Power BI Premium Gen 2, and there's still some in Azure AS, and there is now a seamless migration to get from Azure Analysis Services all the way to Fabric, right? And so you have these large models that are either in Azure Analysis Services or transitioning from Azure Analysis Services to Power BI Premium Gen 2, or they're in Power BI Premium Gen 2 already. All of the new ones are already starting off in Power BI Premium Gen 2. So you have these large models with a bunch of tables, a bunch of relationships, a bunch of complex calculations, and you want to migrate that model over to direct lake. Right. So this is a question that has come up time and time again from customers on the private preview program, and customers want to put a plan together, right? And direct XMLA, right, will be key to that plan to transition to Fabric, right? Because what you will have to do is basically you'll have to ensure that the data prep is done either in the lake or using an ELT architecture with warehouse, and many customers are already doing their data prep in the lake anyway. But if you're using Power Query in your data sets, then you can transition those Power Queries over to Dataflows Gen 2. But then once the data is prepared in the lake, right, and then you can create a direct lake model just over those kind of base tables. You now need to add all of the kind of business intelligence semantic modeling objects on top of those tables, which is going to be your relationships, your measures, your calculation groups, your perspectives, your translations, a bunch of stuff that some of which customers will use Tablet Editor for. So you need to add all of those things to the model that you've just created with your base tables on your direct lake based model. You don't want to have to recreate all of that manually, right? You want to automate that using XMLA, right? So I'm sure there'll be some over, that will be the key. Will be how do you reuse all of those objects? So ALM Toolkit would be very useful in that scenario to just reuse all of the semantic model objects from your import model and just pick them up and drop them on your direct lake model. And I'm sure that Daniel will come up with some good innovations there as well. But ultimately, the number one priority is to make the customer successful. And what customers are talking about right now is, look, I've got big investments in large models and import models in Power BI Premium Gen 2. How do I get that over to Fabric what's the path of least resistance to get there? I don't want to have to recreate all of these things manually, in the web UI or any UI. They just want to automate that and have some mechanism to harvest those objects and put them on the direct lake model. So that's what XMLA Write will enable. That's why Daniel's asking about it, because he knows it's an opportunity. and Daniel's the type of person that looks for opportunities. And that's really key to the migration story to Fabric for these large customers. So it's going to land in the near future. We're working diligently on it. It's going to land, I expect, significantly before general availability. So it's in the works. It's going to land pretty soon. And I agree with Daniel that it's really key to the success of large customers migrated to Fabric.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like read-write ability is going to be big, and it's going to open up a lot of possibilities for scripting, automation, so many other stuff like that.
It's kind of like with the Azure Managed Services automated migration experience. The key with that is that none of your reports break, right? None of your reports, your business users continue to operate as they were before, and now they're empowered with all of the extra capabilities that the platform can offer them. But what worked before needs to continue to work into the future. So the way that you will achieve that is to create a direct lake model that surfaces the same metadata to the reports, the same kind of base tables, the same calculation and measure names and things like that, right? And the only way to do that is to replicate those same semantic model objects that you have in your import model over to your direct lake model. And it will be absolutely possible using XMLA rights, and we will find ways of, and I'm sure Daniel will also find ways of making that easier for customers.
Exactly. And I think for sake of time, there's a couple questions left that I liked about Direct Lake. I have a bunch more that we just won't have time to answer, but I do also want to make sure we get some time to cover Power BI developer and Git integration, which I think is another huge component of that. But a couple ones that I wanted to bring up that are going to go into my queue. So Renato actually had, I thought, a great question on, it's a feature that hasn't been discussed, but Delta Parquet files have that kind of time travel feature, and he was wondering would there ever be any plans to expose that feature kind of within, I'll say, like Power BI datasets or the Power BI experience.
Yeah, it's a good question. There's absolutely plans to expose it. We realize that that's a really great capability that will give you the ability to query the data set or the Parquet in the state that it was in at that point, because Delta Lake has that capability built into it. There's lots of use cases for it, right? You can use it for kind of, kind of like an auditing thing where you can figure out exactly what the data was at any given time. But there will be other use cases for it as well. For enterprise customers, they may want to control when they move to the newest version. Once they've finished their data load processes and they've integrated their data across all these different systems of record and they've done all of their processing. So there's lots of use cases for it. We absolutely tend to expose it. I don't have any definitive details beyond that right now, but yeah, absolutely, we do intend to expose it.
Perfect. And what I'll say, let's do one more question, and then let's talk a little bit about the new developer mode. So, and good segue, because Matthias was very, I think, paramount in the Tyndall and some of the other stuff that's related to developer mode. But
Yeah.
he
Okay.
has a question on how does Direct Lake and QSO work together?
Okay. So query scale out, once it's generally available in based on the previous plan for Power Premium Gen 2 that we'd already disclosed, it will dynamically spin up multiple replicas of the same data set to address high concurrency scenarios, right? So that you can process, in theory, double the queries that you could on a single instance of that data set. So we'll split up a copy of that data set on a separate physical machine. This is the beauty of the Premium Gen 2 architecture.
Mm-hmm.
How will that translate to Direct Lake? 100%. Direct Lake is based on the same core kind of infrastructure. So Direct Lake will 100% benefit from that same optimization, right? We kind of knew in the back of our mind that QSO was a great idea anyway, but the priority of it was a lot higher, knowing that Direct Lake was on the horizon, right? This is why we started it when we started it, because it's gonna, by the time Fabric is GA, QSO will be there for these large data sets, or these massive Parquet files in the lake. They will absolutely benefit from query scale out, and it will just be automatic. That's the difference between query scale out in Fabric and query scale out in Azure Managed Services. The Azure Managed Services, you need to perform an analysis of all of the queries and figure out, statistically speaking, when's the best time to scale from 1 to 2 to 3 instances. Yep. And you need to set up your Azure automation scripts to do it all. It will all be automatic. Fabric is a software as a service system. It will be on by default. All of the customers will benefit from it, whether they know about it or not. And that is really the key difference. It will be a self-managing system. All of our big data features are self-managing. There's a bunch of optimizations that we're doing under the covers for Direct Lake that you don't necessarily even need to know about it. I know a lot of people really want to know about it because it's super cool and interesting, which is great. And we will be transparent about all of the optimizations, exactly. But it will be automatic. And so, some of these optimizations beyond QSO are things that will take Direct Lake to dataset sizes way bigger than import, right? You got your 400. We've got Azure Managed Services was all of your models had to fit within an S9 V2 at 400 gigabytes, all of them together. With Power Premium Gen 2, a single dataset can be up to 400 gigabytes. With buffers for refreshes, etc. With Direct Lake, your dataset sizes will, based on the files in the Parquet files in the lake, will be way bigger than that, right? And you may ask, how is that possible? Well, number one, Direct Lake doesn't care about refreshes, right? You needed like 35% of your memory was used for refreshes previously as a buffer, even if you partitioned the thing, even if you used incremental refreshes. We don't have that problem with Direct Lake, right? That's a massive head start off the bat. Then you come on to some of the dynamic memory management, the way that we're able to swap memory in and out of swap the data in and out of memory for Direct Lake that we are not using as broadly elsewhere. That, coupled with the fact that there's no refreshes, will take us to sizes that are just, by the time we get to GA, we're not even publishing the sizes right now because we really want to optimize it during the public preview. But our goal is to get to a point where you really don't need to worry about the size anymore. Your primary currency that you need to worry about for Fabric is CPU. You purchase an allocation of CPU. You don't need to worry about volume. That's our goal, is to get to a point where Direct Lake will work for sizes way bigger than import on Power Premium Gen 2.
And I think that's actually a great segue. As you're mentioning at the end, like a lot of the cost that's involved that I'm sure we'll get to at the end of this is it's moving away from storage cost to its compute cost. And that's where essentially everything that needs to be scaled up and down for expenses and everything else is largely going to be based off of that, where storage will be a lot cheaper versus whatever the compute cost is to access that data. But without the migration or anything else, the overhead in terms of consumption of data will drastically reduce, because you don't have to, you're not migrating over billions and billions of rows to, put my Carl Sagan voice on for that. So I think this is going to change a lot of information, and
Absolutely.
a lot of I better said, a lot of the design for how these things are architected, for sure.
Absolutely. And just one last note, because I don't want to do developer mode justice, but the vast majority of CPU consumption on Azure Analytics Services and Power BI Premium Gen 2 is refreshes. So, and obviously you still get the queries that they have some CPU consumption, but statistically speaking, that's less than the refreshes. And those will be comparative to what they are today in Power BI Premium Gen 2. But the whole refresh resource consumption, whether it be memory, whether it be CPU, all of that is a thing of the past.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's, and I have a few questions left about DirectClick that I'll keep queued up at the end, given time. But as you're mentioning, I think the other really big important thing, especially from the Power BI perspective, is going to be the Git integration and just Power BI for developers and developer mode. So let's spend a little bit of time on that, because I think that's another game changer.
So let's move to that. Right. And so I highly recommend, if you haven't already, you probably have already, but if you haven't, go and check out the session that Rui, Zoe, and I did. Zoe, I think, is moderating, and perhaps Zoe can send a link to it, where Rui did this demo that shows what we're calling Power BI Desktop Developer Mode. That honestly, this is something that the BI professionals have been asking for since, Power BI Desktop was called the Power BI Designer or whatever. Yeah. I think, let's be honest, Marco put an idea on ideas.powerbi.com that is still one of the highest voted items that has been there since before Power BI Desktop was called Power BI Desktop. Right? To have full programmability and the ability to modify the metadata files using external tools and processes, using automation, and be able to integrate those files into source control repositories, and then integrate with CI/CD and automated deployment processes to deploy across development, test, and production environments, which we have with deployment pipelines. But this is, the kind of traditional CI/CD that the large IT organizations depend on for repeatability of mission critical systems. That they can have automated tests as part of the build process, right? They can have multi-developer collaboration where you can have branches and merges and diff and merge across these files, right? And so this is what developer mode asks for. This is what the BI professional community has been asking for years. Like, I made a joke when I first introduced this at the MVP Summit. You were there, Reed, and I had the picture of me that is on the you shared as part of the promoting this event. And the picture of me from however many years ago it was that I look completely different. That's what I looked like when people started asking for this. So, this is something that the BI pros have been, yearning for, asking for, doing workarounds for, been kind of locked in a box, constrained for all this time. Finally, the BI pros are being set free. Finally, the BI pros are being liberated. And so I absolutely recommend that you watch that demo. It was amazing. So basically, you save, instead of saving to a PBIX or a PBIT, you save to a PBIP, which then stores the artifact metadata on the file system, right? And you can, there is some hardening of at least the dataset metadata, and we're going to harden all of it over time. And you can edit those files externally using other tools and processes, using tablet editor, using automation, and then you can check those files into source control. You can just for now you can open up Visual Studio Code. You can check into source control. and then you can integrate with automated deployment. And we've even given, we've even set up native integration from the Fabric and Power BI workspaces with Git and DevOps, and GitHub will come soon. And so we have a direct integration from the workspace to the Git repo, right? And so it will enable this new deployment flow rather than clicking. You'll still be able to click publish, and we want to enhance the deployment process to get to your development environment from Power BI Desktop. But this will give you the proper kind of CI/CD and automated deployment processes that integrate with source control for the business intelligence professional. So this is super exciting. And
to some of this too, actually, Greg just had a great question that I want to pop up related to this, because I think a big game changer for this is the folderization, multi-authoring scenarios, desktop hardening, as you're talking about through a lot of these integrations, but being able to save a file to a project and have a single piece of software that can have your golden or shared data sets with every single report that's related to it. Each thing can be published and split apart separately. But a good comment or question on this that I want to bring up onto the screen. So will the granularity of the serialized files be customizable? Basically, will you have any ability to customize the structure or organization on how it is organized, or is it all just going to be something that's kind of pre-configured, pre-organized, that's just based off of whatever structure is defined by the documentation?
Yeah, absolutely. So in fact, let me talk about that. So I'm going to transition from the slide so you can
absolutely
make sure that this slide is still showing. So we'll switch to just more of a conversational Q&A at this point. If you're ready, I'm gonna do that now.
Go ahead.
All right. So let's see. So absolutely. So today, when you say save as PBIP, right, and it creates the folder for the report with the report metadata files in there, and it will create one for the data set as well, right? And there's some things in there that will not be checked into source control, like there's an ABF file that is the data, right? So you won't check the data. And this is a problem with checking a PBIX in source control. Well, how big is your PBIX going to be? 100 gigabytes, maybe? So this is, you're able to just check in the relevant data, the relevant metadata, the relevant metadata files into source control. And so for the data set specifically, we are currently saving what is known as the BIM file, right? The BI model file. This originated with SQL Server Data Tools all the way back in 2012, right? And so today, that is your BIM file, which contains your tablet object model metadata, which is JSON today. And that aligns with what we call the tablet model scripting language, right? And so there's a single file for all of the data set today. So we've said publicly that we intend to, we've made this part of the GA criteria for developer mode to integrate the new wonderful Tyndall, the new kid on the block, Tyndall. So much respect and gratitude and recognition to Matthias. I have your gold medal stored here for next time I see you, Matthias. And so, so with Tyndall, the tablet model definition language is what we will GA with, right? And with Tyndall, we will allow breaking out the dataset metadata into multiple files, which means that it integrates much more nicely with source control for versioning and collaboration and things like that, right? And this Tyndall is a big deal. Like, it really is. Like this Tyndall, if you haven't watched the session that Matthias and Gabby did at SQL Bits, highly recommend you watch that. I mean, this Tyndall is a big deal. It's, a YAML-like syntax, which is much more human readable, much more human editable, much more diff and merge friendly. We have big plans for Tyndall. I'm not even going to share all of the plans, but we have big plans for Tyndall. So by the time we GA, you'd say, I want to save as a PBIP, you'd go and look in that data folder. Instead of seeing a bin file, you would see a subfolder probably with the model metadata that will be broken out, at least by the top level objects, right? So, there'll be you'll be able to at some point probably customize, the granularity of the files that are created, but, you'll definitely have a separate file for, the relationships, for the measures, for the tables and all of the different things, and it will all be Tyndall based. Oh, and the one thing about Tyndall is, like if you've ever tried to edit DAX or M in that is stored in the TIMSL format, right, the JSON format, it's very challenging, right? And so it will be the real DAX, it will be the real M that is stored in the Tyndall files. So yeah, that is super exciting as well. So we're working on that by GA of developer mode, and cleaning up the report metadata file as well to make it more source control, at least structured, publicly documented, to be integrated with source control. So those are the two things that we're working on for GA of developer mode.
And I do want to mention for the people in the chat mentioning all the great things coming out with Tyndall. The stream that Matthias did with me as well is in the chat history now, but also following up on the idea of kind of that like readable definition language for the model. Is there anything that you can discuss on a potential for something like that coming to the report.layout file, so the reporting language at all? Because it's also a horribly nested JSON file. I'm trying to build a bookmark documenter off of it, and I can say I've spent a lot of hours digging into the data in the backend, which is not easy to consume. Are there any plans for anything like that, like Tyndall, but basically almost an RDL, or report definition language?
Yeah, we've talked about it. We know we need to clean it up. The GA criteria is to at least have it structured. It will probably still be JSON, but it will be fully structured. It will be fully documented, and it will be much more, make a lot more sense than right now. It may as well be a blob right now. It may as well just, if you look at it right now, it's just not workable. You have to take the whole file as a unit. You could roll back to a previous version of the report, but you can't make any edits to it in any realistic way. Maybe Matthias could, but Matthias is about the only person on the planet that would be able to do that successfully, right? So, so and it's not supported either. Just I have to mention that. But so we plan to have it supported to be editable. It will be structured. There'll be a JSON schema associated with it. And we're going to initially make it a JSON version, kind of like the TIMSL equivalent for the report, and then we'll take it from there. I know there's people out there that have good ideas about creating like an object library, kind of like the TOM equivalent for the report and things like that. We'll see where we go from there. But for now, we're going to at least make it fully documented and structured, and hopefully editable. That's what we're focusing on right now. We need that foundational work done before we can go to the next level. So we'll do that, and Tyndall, and then we'll call it GA, and we'll keep investing in it.
Perfect. And I imagine like there wouldn't be any reason not to. It seems like a natural evolution for it. Basically, anything that's part of the language in the back end, just exposing all of that eventually for automation and anything else related to those. So
100%, makes complete sense. Yeah.
I think there's a couple of questions that I want to probably bring up to start closing off some of the threads, but also I think just as a summary of the kind of storage versus compute, is there kind of just a brief overview you can give on like how the pricing works for this? I know there was a couple questions on people who felt they were a little nebulous on exactly how the structure will be as part of this, like this one tenant subscription and pricing structure with compute versus storage.
Yeah, so it's kind of an evolution of the Power BI Premium Gen 2 model, where you purchase a SKU that has an allocation of CPU, and you can use that CPU for whatever you want. Right now, you may choose to, only use it for Power BI, or you may choose to only use it for data warehousing, or you may choose to only use it for data engineering. But and you have the ability to make sure that it's used for the way you want it. But it's one single business model. Just like it's one copy of data. It's one security model that we're working on. And these are the opportunities that we have by having this unified system. It's simplification, right? So it will be one copy of the data. You don't need to copy it everywhere. We'll get to one single security model, one single governance model that can much more easily get broad visibility of the entire data estate. And then there'll be one business model. This was actually on I think Satya and definitely Scott Guthrie's slide when they introduced Fabric. That it is a single business model where, you know, and this is why we want to take these other variables out of the equation, like, you know, the volume of the data. We want all those to be secondary, right? It's not a PaaS system. It's a SaaS system, software as a service system. There's a single unit of currency that you need to understand as a customer. And you purchase the CPU, you get the allocation, and you can choose to only use it and control it so that it's only used for one of the workloads, or you can use it for all of Fabric and any of the workloads. It's a much simpler model. We will offer it using basically the next generation of Power BI Premium per capacity, right? And there will be some new Azure SKUs because we know that a lot of the existing customers, you know, these IT organizations, their business model and their purchasing model is based on Azure. So there'll be some Azure SKUs that are being launched. I think they're already launched now. And yeah, but it will be a simplification of the business model that is basically you just purchase the CPU and you can use it for whatever you choose.
Perfect. No, I think that's a great, great description of the scalability, and then again, compute costs that this will be determined based on just simple usage and consumption that you have for the organization. So I do like that we're moving into that, especially considering now that there's so many different ways to store data. And I mean, at the end of the day, storage should and isn't really expensive outside of how often you're reading or writing to it to a degree. Right. So I think it's a natural evolution towards where the money needs to go in terms of how hot the servers are. I think this will also be a good point. What I'd love to do is maybe spend a few minutes left if you have time to answer a couple of remaining QA questions. I know I won't be able to get to all of them, but I'm going to cherry pick a couple. Greg brought up one a second time, and it's kind of relevant to the deployment related to the Power BI project files. So I do want to bring this up again, but he wants to know, will Power BI project or PBIPs be deployable in any way via an API and parts? So just the model or the metadata or the report itself. So components of that deployable using any of the API calls. And will that be gated at all behind just like P or F SKUs?
Okay, so the answer is yes. I don't have a timeline for it. We're planning on building kind of CRUD APIs that will leverage the developer mode format for reports and data sets. In fact, we're going to just like we're standardizing on Delta Parquet for the storage of data sets, we're going to actually standardize on the developer mode format for even for PBIXs. At some point, if you are brave enough to crack open a PBIX, you will see the same storage file structure in the PBIX because it's basically a zip file as what you see in the PBIP project. So, and the CRUD APIs that we will build to deploy and to update will all adhere to that same format, and standardizing that format across all of these kind of tools and processes will really, make that automation that much easier, right? So the answer is yes, Greg. It makes a lot of sense. I just don't have a timeline right now, but the answer is yes.
He often has really good questions for that. And I think the amount of automation and batching that I think is going to eventually come down the pipeline, and external tools that are going to support that. Like, I mean, I know PBI tools that Matthias has built, and I'm sure other ones that don't even exist. Like and someday, like my goal vision is I'd love to be able to get to the point where, either through ChatGPT or a tool, you can companies can have easy automated deployment of reports where you configure a couple variables and it just uses the API or whatever is needed to spit those out, and it auto generates them, and they just pop up for branches of an organization. I see the future like at the end of the tunnel with a lot of this stuff related.
Yeah, absolutely, Reed. So let's just briefly talk about ChatGPT and Copilot.
Please.
I don't know if people saw Zoe's demo of that's query view. That is the biggest Microsoft funded innovation in DAX tooling in the history of DAX, right, by far. And we've got big plans for that. I'm not going to go into all the future things on the horizon for that, but you know, the first version will be pretty much what you saw demo, Zoe demo. I can't disclose it. It wasn't in the announcement slide. You know, it was a sneak peek of what's coming. I can't disclose the timelines, but that will have Copilot integrated with it for DAX query generation, as you saw, and we'll also have Copilot for other scenarios. You know, there'll be modeling scenarios. I mean, it's going to show up everywhere, Reed. Like I can't. I'm going to stop myself from going in right now into all of the potential applications that it's going to show up in, because you know, at the moment we're focusing on GA and Fabric, but ChatGPT and Copilot is an integral part of Fabric. There are some key things that are going to be shipped in that time frame. You know, things like the summary visual, which is really for the consumer of the report, and the interaction with the report. We're working on those things, and the DAX query generation. And honestly, this thing is going to just be so prevalent, Reed. Like we're going to, when we have another discussion like this in a few years' time, like this thing will be everywhere. Like we'll, you know, ChatGPT will be the third person being in the interview or something. Like it's going to be everywhere. Yeah.
Some of the stuff that I've already even seen as use cases for it is I mean, like with notebooks and Spark, you know, being able to ask to generate queries off of that. Like, I mean, I know the first thing that I'm going to be learning, you know, because I have to continue to expand my knowledge base as a consultant in this, especially as an independent consultant. I'm going to start needing to learn how to do a lot more Spark jobs, because that is much more integrated now into Power BI. And I was talking with Rui and Matthias, and like one thing that we're thinking about is scalability. Is now that we're parking a lot more data outside of large data set formats, it's not using Power Query and Power BI anymore. It's going to be kept, you know, in one lake. And like you could in theory use data flows Gen 2, dump the data into there. That's kind of the easiest lift and shift from Power BI into that. But also maybe you want to actually do a Spark job or something else to generate the Delta Parquet files, to stick your massive data sets into there, or better said, massive tables, to then ingest via direct lake connections. But using Copilot in that degree of being able to say, ask it to point to a Power Query that maybe is sitting somewhere and rescript this as a Spark job or something like that. So having that as almost a Rosetta Stone translator to be able to go from one language to the other, and write that for you, but then, you know, obviously let you adjust and edit it. Even just being able to learn and teach yourself a bit of how to code just by asking it, you know, show me how to, you know, to grab data and do these transformations, and then you kind of self-teach yourself off of that, which people are using ChatGPT for already, is to, you know, to learn SQL or any of those others. But that's how I see the big future, that is 100%. Being able to move queries.
It will be transformative. You know, it's just a massive time saver. It doesn't need to be perfect off the bat. Eventually, maybe it will be really good, but it's a time saver. It will save you 60% of the time to get up and running, and then you need to optimize it further. It will be, like you said, and I'm talking about the pro experiences for code generation and things like that, right? It will be a learning experience. Like, you know, there are some course providers out there that provide really good content. What if we somehow you know, outsource that content to be integrated into ChatGPT, or sorry, to Power BI Copilot as a kind of learning experience, where you can do modules through Copilot. Like, there's so many applications. Like, the thing is, I mean, we don't even know all the applications right now. Like, that's the reality, right? Like, I'm just inspired everywhere I look. Like, I just, as a side note, like, there's this you may know this website called Khan Academy, run by Sal Khan. I've got immense respect for this guy. I find him inspirational. And it's a website that does math and, you know, physics and stuff like that. And I spend time with my son on it at the weekend, and it's a lot of fun. And if you look at his demos with ChatGPT, like that thing, he's got a better kind of Copilot experience for training people on hard topics like calculus and things like that than you can get from most human teachers. And guess what? It's even got humor built into it, right? You know, It's
Yeah.
like
Hmm.
this thing is it's gonna be massive, right? So yeah, we're at the dawn of a new era, both in terms of fabric, in terms of the delivery of analytics projects, in terms of the how customers are going to be successful in terms of analytics projects, and we're in the age of AI, right? We're in the age of this will be infused with Copilot from left to right, from top to bottom. We've just got the building blocks in place, right? We still need to build the house, right? And this thing is gonna this thing is gonna be huge. Like it's a super exciting time. Like the stars are really aligning. Yeah.
Agreed. And I think we're just scratching the surface on what it can be used for, because like it's still teaching itself new capabilities. And like we can have whole fun conversations on that. But like I think there's a bit of excitement, and people probably have a little bit of concern on exactly what it will be able to automate. But there's I'll just say there's a lot of possibilities for the integration, and the fact that Microsoft ingested what 10 billion into OpenAI as a you buying it to a degree without buying it and just incorporating it everywhere in their products.
Yeah.
So really cool stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll just quickly say that we are my team is responsible for product management for the scope that I defined earlier, and my team is not the only team in Microsoft, right? Obviously, that does product management. Every single team in Microsoft has had this charter, this directive from top down. Find a way to make Copilot and part of an integrated experience. It's like this thing has just come out of like 6 months prior. All of our plans, all of our backlogs, all of our delivery processes have been changed practically overnight with this ChatGPT thing. So it's a massive priority, from Satya through to Scott, through to Arun, and through to every single lead of every single PM team in Microsoft. So it's going to be it's going to happen.
Yeah, it's a matter of when, not if.
Yeah.
I do want to. I think there was one like broad question that I think will be good to take or to step into to kind of finish off our conversations today. But Matthias had one that was spun up earlier that he wanted to bring up. But Microsoft Fabric, how is it familiar or similar to maybe what Snowflake envisioned, or partially set up but never quite completed?
Okay, so I mean, I'm just going to answer this like at the high level, right?
Yeah.
There are some. Honestly, you've got Snowflake and the ELT type of architecture, and honestly, they're kind of bolting in. And I'm not saying this to try and be negative about any other vendor, but they're kind of adding Parquet and Delta Lake as, I don't want to call it an afterthought, but it wasn't part of their architecture from the ground up, whereas Databricks it was, right? And Databricks is a lake-centric architecture. So this is the key with Fabric. We are lake-centric from the ground up, and we have a data warehouse that will let you do your ELT type processing as well, right? So if that's what you want to do, you can do that, and it will be natively stored in Parquet form. So I'm not having a go at any other vendor. I'm just saying that's my perception of the market. Is you have Snowflake, which is predominantly ELT based, which is predominantly proprietary storage based. From the original architecture. You have Databricks that is open standard format, but Delta Lake and Parquet, and is more of a lake centric architecture. So honestly, we have both those capabilities in. We are lake centric, we are open standard, and we have the data warehouse that will let you do your ELT type processing and still store the data as one copy of the data in the lake that you can integrate with all of the other Fabric analytical engines. So that's, and I'm not saying that because we are better than anyone else or whatever. You can judge that for yourself. That's the way I see the market.
And I think you hit on a good point of like it's with a lot of these, like, what was this an integration that was added later on, or was this built from the ground up with this idea in mind, between Fabric, Snowflake, and you also mentioned Databricks, in between any of those. So I think that was a good analogy in comparison of each of those.
Yeah.
I do know I have a few questions left, but I also want to be considerate of time. So I think that was a good question to kind of finish on today. Looks like we probably had at its peak up to about 85 or 90 people on the stream. So good, healthy amount of people that were really wanting to tune in and just see everything that Fabric has to offer. And Christian, I want to say thank you for coming on with this. It's always a pleasure to have a conversation with you. And it was really enjoyable to be able to kind of dive into some of these topics and focus on this a bit from that Power BI perspective. Because I mean, we only scratched what 20-30% of what's really even available in Fabric. We have all the other Azure AI stuff and notebooks and Spark and all that, tons of other capabilities. But I think just the evolution perspective alone for Power BI, there's a lot of new stuff coming down. And for me, exciting things. Like I have definitely things on my list this year to continue to learn and to increase my tool set. But I think as one takeaway, what would be from the Power BI perspective, what's something that if people were to go spend a couple of hours in the next few months to learn or dive into as something to integrate for their organization that's a part of this platform, what would be the takeaway of like, hey, go learn this first as something that you can add to your organization as a feature that was released as part of this platform?
I'd say the main thing right now, Reed, is to try out Direct Lake. And yeah, thank you for the opportunity to talk about it. In my mind, this is the next generation of Power BI. This is the next generation of analysis services, but it's actually part of something really much bigger, right? This is the difference between Fabric and Databricks and Snowflake. This is a complete analytics platform from end to end, from ingestion all the way to the user and everything in between, right? Yep. This is the key difference. It's one system, right? It's not even we are the only vendor to be strongly represented in each of those quadrants. We're the only, but we were competing within the scope of each of those quadrants, right? Whereas we have a differentiator that no one else can compete with now. And it's just a fact. It's just the truth that it's a single unified analytics platform with one copy of data, one unified system. That's the big takeaway from it. It's open platform, it avoids vendor lock-in, integrated with Office. But that's the big takeaway about it. But as I say, from the Power BI standpoint, the biggest innovation is Direct Lake. As we saw, Direct Lake is really the secret sauce behind Fabric that makes Fabric a true unified system with one copy of data. So try it out. And I like I say, I'm confident, and we have made it a goal that existing BI professionals will find it familiar experiences and be empowered to broaden their capabilities. If you're a BI pro that knows Power BI Premium Gen 2 well, you should transition quite easily to Fabric, but you will be empowered to do things at lots of other levels of the data stack that you weren't before, right? With familiar experiences. And there'll be a few new concepts that you need to learn. Obviously, it's all a learning experience. If it wasn't, it wouldn't be so much fun. But that's the goal, is that it's a seamless transition for the BI pros that have been just within the realm of Power BI to now transition across this entire unified analytics platform.
And just the last little paraphrase on there is, I mean, it was essentially built off of the same UI experience that Power BI was. It's supposed to be very familiar as far as that. You just have more options, more things to add, more artifacts to put in, but it's basically an upgraded, enhanced version of that same experience. So it's an easy upgrade for people already using Power BI.
It's an evolution of the Power BI kind of infrastructure, which is why if you don't need, there's no migration effort to get from Power BI Premium Gen 2 to Fabric, right? So that's absolutely true. Yeah.
Beautiful. So yeah, Christian, thank you so much for coming on today. I appreciate that. I'm sure at some point in the future, as in the next 12 to 24 months, more things continue to come out of this. There'll be opportunity to have you back on again. It's always a pleasure. So thank you so much for joining, and everyone. Thanks for all the questions in the chat. Like, it was very active. Didn't get to all of them, but if you have any of those outstanding questions as well, those are always great things to put onto the the Power BI community. I always recommend people to go there because it's a great place where both myself and a lot of other MVPs continue to answer questions. So another good resource to get some of those things answered. But otherwise,
yeah, absolutely, Reid.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Perfect.
Oh,
then, yeah, everyone have a great weekend, and
yeah,
I will
see
you on the next live stream.
Thank you very much, Reid. I just want to say that I really enjoyed this. This is something that I really wanted to do, that we've kept this locked in a box for so long. It feels quite liberating to openly talk about it. So thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'll see you next time.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. And if you want to help support this channel, take a look at our channel memberships or our merchandise store for cool swag. And last but not least, please consider sharing this video on your social media platform of choice to help our channel grow. So, until next time.